What if, in the middle of a bustling New York street, an elderly man clutching a battered briefcase collapsed before an indifferent crowd, his last hope slipping away with the scattered papers spilling onto the pavement? What if, in that exact moment, a stranger, someone unexpected, stepped forward, refusing to let him fade into the chaos? Harrison Moore had spent years running, guarding the truth hidden within that briefcase. But as his body failed him, so did his chances of revealing the corruption he had spent his life trying to expose. Just as darkness threatened to consume him, a hand reached out, one belonging to none other than Keanu Reeves. But why did fate intertwine their paths? And what secrets lay within that briefcase that powerful forces would do anything to bury? Join us in reflecting on this true story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more daily stories like this. Share your thoughts in the comments section and let us know where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. Harrison Moore, a frail, elderly man dressed in a threadbare coat, walked cautiously down a crowded sidewalk in New York City. Each step he took seemed heavy, as if his legs might give out at any moment. He clutched a worn briefcase against his chest, gripping it like a priceless treasure. The city bustled around him. People hurried along with their own concerns, traffic lights flashed, and taxis honked impatiently. Yet in the midst of this urban frenzy, Harrison stood out like a ghost, seen by everyone, truly noticed by no one. Ever since he had arrived in the city, Harrison had been glancing over his shoulder, searching for something or someone. He stopped once to lean against a bus stop, trying to steady his breath. The weight in his chest felt more oppressive with every minute, a physical ache that made his steps unsteady. He whispered to himself, "Not now, please not now," as though begging his body for just a little more time. Though a few passers-by shot him curious or even concerned looks, most hurried on their way without a second glance. A crisp wind blew loose papers across the sidewalk, and Harrison blinked against the dust. He felt an ominous sense that his time was running out. He carefully adjusted his grip on the briefcase, reflecting on the precious contents inside. This wasn't an ordinary satchel filled with daily errands or unimportant documents. It contained evidence he had gathered over a lifetime, papers that represented truth, justice, and perhaps redemption. But it was also a magnet for danger. He tried to catch the attention of a well-dressed man hurrying by. "Sir, excuse me," Harrison rasped, but his voice was too feeble, and the man disappeared into the crowd. Desperation clawed at him. He eyed a woman walking her dog and opened his mouth to speak again, but she crossed the street before he could even utter a word. Rejection after rejection chipped away at his resolve. He knew if he gave up now, the truth he was protecting might vanish forever. Suddenly, a crushing pain pulsed through his chest. He inhaled sharply, knees buckling. For a moment, the city seemed to tilt, buildings swirling into a blur of concrete and glass. Harrison tried to steady himself by grabbing a lamppost, but his strength was failing. The sidewalk felt like it was moving beneath his feet. He gritted his teeth, determined to take just a few more steps. His heart pounded in his ears, and a cold sweat soaked through his collar. As he reached another crowded intersection, everything went black at the edges of his vision. He stumbled and dropped to one knee. His briefcase slipped from his grip, spilling papers across the ground in a flurry of white. "No," he gasped, reaching out with trembling fingers. But as the pain crescendoed, his body gave up. He collapsed fully onto the hard concrete, the scattered sheets fluttering around him. The world blurred into distant sounds, a passing car horn, footsteps rushing, and then fading away. He tried to speak, but only a faint whisper escaped. "The briefcase, please." His eyelids grew heavy, and consciousness began to slip through his grasp like sand in an hourglass. Would this be how his story ended? Alone on a busy New York sidewalk? But just then, as if fate herself intervened, a figure exited a nearby cafe and paused at the sight of the fallen man. This person did not walk by, did not avert their eyes. Instead, they rushed forward, kneeling beside Harrison. A soft hand touched his shoulder, and a calm but concerned voice asked, "Sir, can you hear me? Are you all right?" Harrison couldn't respond, But the simple fact that someone had stopped gave him a flicker of hope. He felt a jacket being laid over him, shielding him from the cold. The newcomer began gathering the scattered papers. Though Harrison's vision was nearly gone, he caught a glimpse of the Good Samaritan's face. Recognition sparked faintly, but he had no strength to confirm it. An ambulance was called. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the city around them felt suspended in that moment. As Harrison drifted in and out of consciousness, he prayed silently that whoever this was, this stranger who had finally stopped to help, would protect the one thing that mattered most, the truth locked in that battered briefcase. Little did he know, the man crouched beside him was Keanu Reeves, and this chance meeting would forever alter both their lives. The ambulance arrived swiftly, its lights cutting through the bustling streets of Manhattan. EMTs jumped out and raced over to assess Harrison's condition. Among them was paramedic Wilson, a tall woman with a calm demeanor who immediately started checking the old man's vital signs. Keanu Reeves stayed at Harrison's side, supporting his head gently and making sure the briefcase remained close by. He's showing signs of severe fatigue, possible cardiac distress, paramedic Wilson muttered, while her partner fetched a stretcher. Keanu handed over the last of the scattered documents he had gathered from the sidewalk. For a moment, Wilson's eyes flickered over the pages, but her focus remained on saving the patient's life. Let's get him on oxygen and head to the hospital. Keanu Reeves, still feeling the rush of adrenaline, spoke up, I'll ride with him. I can't just let him go alone. The paramedics exchanged looks but nodded. A bystander might have recognized Keanu as the famous actor, but in that moment, he was simply another concerned individual, determined to help a stranger in need. The ride to the hospital was tense. Harrison drifted in and out of awareness, occasionally murmuring, "My briefcase? Don't lose it, everything's in there." Keanu held the battered case, glancing down at it and wondering what could possibly be so important that this elderly man would cling to it with his last ounce of strength. The swirl of curiosity and compassion compelled Keanu to keep it safe. At Memorial General Hospital, Harrison was rushed into the emergency room. Nurses and doctors hurried around him, checking vitals, stabilizing his blood pressure, and preparing him for the intensive care unit. One of the attending physicians, Dr. Bennett, emerged after a flurry of activity. She recognized Keanu from the waiting area. "Are you family?" Dr. Bennett asked. Keanu hesitated, still holding the briefcase. "No, I'm not. I just found him outside." He collapsed on the sidewalk. "I couldn't leave him there." Dr. Bennett looked at him for a moment, measuring the concern in his eyes. "He's in critical condition. We're doing our best to stabilize him, but you should be prepared for anything. Do you know his name or any medical history?" Keanu shook his head slowly. "I only heard him say something about needing help, about some documents he was protecting." Dr. Bennett gave a sympathetic nod and returned to tend to Harrison. Meanwhile, Keanu sank into a plastic chair in the waiting room. The briefcase gripped tightly in his hands. He could sense the weight of it, not just its physical heft, but the significance it seemed to hold for the man who had nearly given his life guarding it. Minutes stretched into hours. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and people came and went, but Keanu's eyes remained on the doors to the emergency area, his mind swirling with questions. Who was this elderly man? What was in that briefcase that made him risk collapsing in the street rather than letting go? And why did Keanu feel such an urge to protect a stranger's secrets? Finally, Nurse Rogers approached, fatigue written across her features. "He's stable for now, but his condition is very delicate," she said, managing a gentle smile. "We haven't been able to get much information out of him yet. He keeps asking for his briefcase, for you not to let it out of your sight." Keanu's grip tightened. "Thank you, Nurse Rogers. Can I see him?" She motioned for him to follow, leading him through a maze of hallways to a small room in the ICU. Machines beeped softly around a pale, fragile figure. The old man lay with eyes half open, breathing in shallow rasps. Yet when he spotted Keanu standing at the door, holding the briefcase, a flicker of relief passed over his features. Quietly, Keanu stepped closer to the bed. "Hey," he said gently. "I'm Keanu Reeves. The paramedic said your name is Harrison Moore." The old man took a moment to respond. His throat seemed dry, and his hands trembled as he reached for the bed rail. Yes, he finally managed, in a voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for saving me, and for keeping it safe. Keanu offered him a reassuring nod, placing the briefcase where Harrison could see it. I promised you I would, but I have to know. What's in there that's so important? Harrison's tired eyes slid toward the old leather. It's my life's work, he rasped. Evidence, corruption. All of it is in there. He paused, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and resolve. I've been trying to expose them for years, but they destroyed my reputation. Took everything from me. Keanu felt his heart clench with empathy. He had encountered countless scripts and stories in Hollywood, but nothing could compare to seeing this real-life drama unfold before him. In that brief glimpse of Harrison's pain, Keanu sensed that protecting this man's cause might be more than just a moral obligation. It could be the very purpose he was meant to serve in that moment. The hum of hospital machines filled the room, underscoring the gravity of Harrison's words. Keanu placed a comforting hand on the old man's arm. We'll figure this out, he murmured, though he wasn't entirely sure how. You're not alone in this anymore. Harrison's chest rose and fell with laborious effort, and Dr. Bennett advised him to rest. Yet, despite his physical weakness, a fire lit his gaze whenever he glanced at the briefcase. Keanu could tell that this drive, the mission to unveil a hidden truth, was what kept Harrison going through the pain. Over the next day, as Harrison's condition stabilized just enough for him to speak in short bursts, he shared fragments of his past. Between labored breaths, he recounted how he had once been a dedicated teacher at a public school called Oakwood Elementary, located in a struggling neighborhood. For decades, he guided children who lacked resources and support, watching them blossom when given the right encouragement. Harrison described his younger self as someone who believed wholeheartedly in the transformative power of education. His classroom was a second home for many kids, where he would stay late helping them catch up on lessons or find a place to stay warm after school. But that unwavering dedication led him down a path he never anticipated. He told Keanu about how he first noticed discrepancies in the school's finances, strange paperwork, missing funds that were supposed to go toward books, improvements, and essential programs for underprivileged students. Curious, he started asking questions, collecting records, and digging deeper into the administration's activities. Late one evening, he stumbled upon documents that revealed a network of corruption. The names of local officials, school board members, and even charity organizations were entangled in suspicious money transfers. Harrison knew that if the allegations were true, it meant the children, those innocent, hopeful souls, had been robbed of opportunities that could shape their future. Feeling a moral imperative, he confronted the school principal, a man we'll call Principal Thompson, with his findings. The response was ice-cold: denial, intimidation, and a clear warning that meddling in such affairs would not end well. But Harrison pressed on, convinced that the truth would triumph as long as he had irrefutable proof. That proof, stored in the battered briefcase, included financial ledgers, signed contracts, and even photographs linking the principal and others to lavish events funded by money that was ostensibly meant for the students. As Harrison methodically built his case, an unseen network closed in on him. He was abruptly fired, accused of misconduct that ruined his spotless record. The smear campaign against him was relentless. Local media outlets, which he believed might help, dismissed him as a disgruntled ex-employee. Friends distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. And so, bit by bit, Harrison's entire world collapsed. His retirement savings dwindled as he tried to fight back legally. Lawyers who initially showed interest became silent after a few meetings. They must have been bought off, Harrison whispered, his eyes clouding with bitter recollection. Or they realized they were outmatched. When powerful people can manipulate the system, truth is easily buried. As Harrison recounted these events, Keanu felt a swell of both outrage and admiration. This elderly man, now lying in a hospital bed with trembling hands, was once a mighty force standing up to corruption. He had no fame to shield him, no fortune to cushion the fallout, only an unshakable conviction that these stolen funds needed to be returned where they belonged. Eventually, Harrison's fight forced him into hiding. He traveled from one place to another, clinging to the briefcase as the last shred of evidence that might one day bring justice. But as the years wore on, he felt his health declining. He knew he was running out of time. When he arrived in New York City, it was his final attempt to approach someone, anyone, who might care enough to help. Keanu listened intently, every revelation deepening his resolve. It wasn't just about rescuing a stranger anymore. It was about shining a light on a buried wrong and helping countless children who were robbed of a better future. The question now was how to do it. "We can't go to the local authorities directly," Keanu observed. "Not if the corruption is as widespread as you say." Harrison nodded slowly. "They're everywhere. Connections run deep. If they see me coming, they'll shut the doors again, or worse." Keanu leaned forward. "What if we go to the media? A reputable investigative journalist with a platform big enough to make this public before they can silence it?" A flicker of hope sparked in Harrison's weary eyes. "It's risky, but it might be the only way. Once the story is out, it becomes much harder to hide." They agreed to find a journalist known for integrity and a willingness to tackle powerful institutions. Even as they talked strategy, Harrison's hand clutched the bedrail, and his face paled with exertion. Nurse Rogers checked his vitals, cautioning him to rest. "You've been through a lot, Mr. Moore," she said gently. "Your body needs time to recover." Harrison forced a thin smile. "I've carried this secret for so long," he whispered, glancing at Keanu. "I can't thank you enough for listening, for helping." Keanu felt a wave of humility. Anyone with a conscience would do the same. "I'm just glad I was there when you collapsed. Now we've got a fight on our hands, and I won't back down." In that quiet hospital room, amid the hum of medical machines, two unlikely allies sealed a pact. One was a once idealistic teacher who had lost everything in pursuit of justice, and the other was a world-famous actor who refused to walk away. Together, they would try to bring to light what had been hidden for far too long. With Harrison still in the hospital, Keanu Reeves took the initiative to track down a journalist willing to delve into the evidence. After reaching out discreetly to a handful of contacts, he was introduced to Jennifer Atkins, a respected investigative reporter known for exposing powerful figures involved in illegal schemes. She agreed to meet Keanu at the hospital, intrigued by the urgency in his voice. When Jennifer arrived in Harrison's room, she was greeted by the sight of a thin, pale man who looked both hopeful and haunted. Keanu handed her the briefcase, explaining that it contained documents outlining extensive embezzlement and corruption at a public school, likely connected to a broader web of deceit. Jennifer leafed through the papers, her expression growing graver with each page. "I see names of local politicians, nonprofits, and even what appears to be shell companies," she murmured. "If these documents are authentic, this is massive. It won't just be a school scandal. It could shake the entire network that's profited off these kids." Harrison's voice was quiet but firm. "The children never saw a dime of the funds raised in their name. I've risked everything to bring this to light. If you publish it, be prepared for serious pushback." Jennifer nodded, her eyes sparkling with determination. "I've had threats before. I know how to handle them. But this story must be airtight. Let me verify these documents, cross-check the data, and gather more interviews. Once it's ready, we'll go public in a big way, online, print, and hopefully on national TV." The plan was set. Over the next few days, while Harrison regained enough strength to sit up in bed, Jennifer called in favors from forensic accountants and legal experts. Each piece of evidence was meticulously authenticated. The deeper they dug, the more shocking the extent of the corruption became. Money was siphoned off not just from Oakwood Elementary's budget, but from several other schools across multiple districts. The organization behind it all had ties to influential people who had strong reasons to keep it quiet. Meanwhile, Keanu noticed an unsettling change in the atmosphere around the hospital. Occasionally, a stranger would linger too long in the hallway near Harrison's room, or a car would remain parked out front with someone inside it, watching. One afternoon, Keanu found a hastily written note slipped under Harrison's door. "Stop. This is your final warning. He shared it with Harrison, who looked neither surprised nor intimidated. They've been chasing me for years, he said. But this time, I'm not alone. Keanu took steps to ensure their safety. He arranged for off-duty security personnel he knew, through a friend, to keep an eye on the hospital corridor. He also worked with Jennifer to keep the location of her office undisclosed to potential informants or intruders. Time was of the essence. If word leaked that they were about to blow the lid off a major scandal, the individuals involved would try to quash it at any cost. Meanwhile, Harrison's health teetered between improvement and setbacks. One evening, Dr. Bennett approached Keanu. "We need to be cautious. Mr. Moore's heart condition is serious. Stress could aggravate it." She looked at the tension in Keanu's face. "But I can tell this story matters to both of you. Just make sure he doesn't push himself too far." Keanu returned to Harrison's bedside with the doctor's warning fresh in his mind. "We need you to get well enough to see this through," he said softly, gripping the old man's hand. "Let Jennifer and me handle the legwork." Harrison's eyes were determined. "I'll do my best, but you must promise me something. If anything happens to me, don't let the story die." His voice wavered slightly, a testament to the vulnerability he felt. "All I've done will be for nothing if they bury this again." "You have my word," Keanu replied, his voice steady. "We're in this together. No one is burying anything ever again." Outside the hospital, Jennifer Atkins was systematically piecing the puzzle together. She spoke with former employees who had also been dismissed under suspicious circumstances. She got hold of local residents who remembered hearing rumors about lavish spending sprees by certain officials. And with each conversation, the picture became clearer. A sprawling network of greed that had siphoned millions from public schools over the years. Finally, the moment arrived. Jennifer had enough evidence to write her exposé. The first installment of her investigation would go live in a reputable news outlet. She planned a follow-up piece and had secured a slot on a national news broadcast to discuss the findings. Throughout it all, Harrison remained in that hospital bed, physically fragile but emotionally resolute. Keanu brought him updates, reading aloud drafts of Jennifer's articles. Harrison would close his eyes, a tear sliding down his cheek at the thought that maybe, just maybe, justice was within reach after all. That night, Harrison looked at Keanu with a mixture of gratitude and awe. "I never expected a famous actor to be the one saving me from the sidewalk, let alone championing my fight," he said. Keanu lowered his gaze humbly. "Sometimes life puts you in the right place at the right time," he murmured. "I'm just doing what anyone with a heart should do." The morning that Jennifer's story broke felt electric. Headlines splashed across news sites read, "Massive embezzlement scheme targets public schools. Ex-teacher provides explosive evidence." Within hours, social media buzzed with outrage and disbelief. Parents, educators, and concerned citizens demanded answers. TV pundits debated the moral decay of such institutions, while commentators praised the courage of the whistleblower. In Harrison's hospital room, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews. Old acquaintances called to express shock and support. Nurse Rogers had to intervene just to give Harrison a break from the constant stream of calls. Dr. Bennett, though cautious about his condition, acknowledged that the emotional boost from seeing justice unfold might be the best medicine for him. Jennifer's investigation named names: Principal Thompson from Oakwood Elementary, several local officials, and even a couple of state-level politicians who had looked the other way. The expose revealed how funds earmarked for underprivileged children had been funneled through shell charities, then rerouted into private bank accounts and luxury perks. It was a scheme that had thrived on intimidation and silence, until now. With the evidence out in the open, law enforcement agencies felt the heat of public scrutiny. Principal Thompson was taken into custody, and warrants were issued for other key players in the operation. The sight of them led away in handcuffs became a defining image on the evening news. In parallel, philanthropic groups and local charities expressed their willingness to help restore resources to the schools that had been victimized. Donations poured in, and community volunteers began organizing programs to help the students catch up on lost opportunities. Public outcry transformed into public action, galvanizing people into reclaiming the future of their children. Harrison, lying in his hospital bed, watched it all unfold on TV. Tears welled up when he saw footage of Oakwood Elementary students celebrating the promise of new books and better facilities. In that moment, he felt a burden lift, replaced by a deep sense of relief and triumph. Keanu Reeves stayed by his side through it all. "You did it," Keanu whispered to him. "All those years, all that sacrifice, it's finally paying off." Harrison smiled, thin but radiant. "We did it," he corrected softly. "I couldn't have done this alone. You saved my life in more ways than one." As the days passed, Harrison's health slowly improved. Dr. Bennett confirmed that, while he would require ongoing care, he was well enough to leave the hospital under supervision. Before he was discharged, Jennifer Atkins came by to pay her respects. "Thank you for trusting me with this," she said, holding Harrison's hand. "Your courage has helped countless children, and I promise to keep following this story until real change happens." Harrison thanked her, eyes brimming with grateful tears. He also expressed his heartfelt appreciation for the hospital staff, especially Nurse Rogers and Dr. Bennett, who had fought so hard to keep him alive long enough to see his mission succeed. Outside, the sun was bright, and a crisp breeze stirred the autumn leaves. Keanu led Harrison, now walking slowly but proudly, out the hospital doors. Reporters snapped photos and shouted questions, but Keanu shielded him from the frenzy. He guided Harrison into a waiting car that would take him to a quiet place away from the media circus. The city still hustled and bustled, but Harrison felt different now, lighter, as if the monumental burden on his shoulders had finally been lifted. His mind drifted to the children at Oakwood Elementary and the thought that maybe, in the next school year, they would have all the resources they deserved. Perhaps some future teacher, seeing those children thrive, would never suspect the dark corruption that once threatened their education. Sitting beside him in the car, Keanu gazed out at the skyscrapers sliding past. He had gone from being a passerby stepping out of a cafe to a key player in unveiling a scandal that touched countless lives. Yet he felt no regret, only a quiet sense of fulfillment. If fate placed him in a position to help, he had done what he believed was right. Harrison placed a trembling hand on Keanu's arm. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." Keanu looked at him, voice warm with kindness. "You've already repaid me. You taught me that real heroism can come from the most overlooked corners of our world. Thank you for letting me be part of this." Some stories end with a final closing line, but for Harrison Moore and Keanu Reeves, this was more of a new beginning. They had emerged from the darkest corridors of corruption into the light of truth. And though the fight for justice never truly ends, they had proved that when one person dares to speak up and another dares to stand by them, change can happen, even against the longest of odds. When Harrison Moore first collapsed on that busy sidewalk, he was one man against a system that had silenced him. His entire life's work lay hidden in a battered briefcase, representing years of research, heartbreak, and unwavering determination. By chance, or perhaps by destiny, Keanu Reeves became the caring stranger who stopped to help him at the very moment he needed it most. Their partnership was a testament to how a single act of kindness can shape the course of events for countless others. The corruption they exposed not only brought justice to those responsible, but also restored crucial resources to the children who deserved them all along. Harrison's quiet heroism reminded the world that any individual, no matter how seemingly powerless, can spark transformative change if they persevere in the face of adversity. Today, Oakwood Elementary and other schools implicated in the scheme are on a path to recovery, supported by renewed funds and a community determined to protect what matters most: the education and well-being of its children. Harrison, though physically frail, stands vindicated, finally free of the burden he carried for so long. And Keanu, famous as he may be, remains a humble figure who stepped beyond the spotlight to do what was right. In a world that often overlooks the suffering of the vulnerable, this story serves as a powerful reminder. Never underestimate the difference you can make by stopping to help. One moment of compassion can shatter the walls of injustice, and one determined voice can echo far beyond its time.